Welcome along to day 2 of our City Focus Week, which we are collaborating on with our friends and partners at Nova Financial. And joining me throughout the week is Nova MD Paul Mahoney, who is also an investor in these cities himself, along with his clients. And Paul, yesterday we kind of did an overview of how cities are going to be part of a pivotal part of the COVID-19 recovery. Today, we are going to turn our spotlight on Birmingham. Now, back in January 2015, I started a new thread on Property Tribes, which proclaimed that Birmingham was the most investable city in the UK. And now, 6-7 years later, I think it's still true.
Yeah, I'd completely agree. I think that's great timing. That's just after I started Nova, actually. So that's when we started looking at Birmingham and some other cities back then. And I think it's quite interesting that back then it was somewhat difficult to convince people from London or overseas to consider Birmingham as a serious place to invest. But now we're what are we, 7 years down the line? Just over 6 years down the line, and it's proven itself. You were certainly right to be saying that back then. But there is still lots of potential around the city as well. There are some areas that have more than doubled in price over that time frame. So, yeah, really interesting. A lot of those fundamentals that existed back then still stand. If anything, they've kind of been proven to be the case. But there are certainly some sort of pockets of value around the city, whereas others have got quite expensive, I would say, over that time frame.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking a little bit about how to identify those pockets of value. I think a really interesting place to go to next, Paul, is that Birmingham, according to a JLL report from a few months ago, is the most valuable area of UK property outside of London. That really is quite an astonishing fact. It shows that there's a lot of wealth in the Birmingham area, and wealth is, good news for investors.
And that kind of makes sense given what has happened over that sort of 6 or 7 year period that we were just referring to. Is you've had so much infrastructure spending take place there. Now, infrastructure spending meaning we're improving transport, we're creating jobs. There's been lots of jobs moved to the city, well-paying jobs that just didn't exist in that city previously, and now they do. So you have a sort of new type of person that wants to live in that city rather than just wanting to live in London. So there's been a whole sort of regeneration, gentrification type process, whatever you want to call it. It's been very positive so far as, the money and the economic activity that's taking place in Birmingham.
Yeah, we talked yesterday about, that cities tick a lot of boxes for investors. And I think 3 of the most important boxes are investment, infrastructure, and communication. And those 3 things are paramount to jobs. And obviously jobs are paramount because we want tenants that are in stable employment. And cities actually do give a fair bit of choice to investors as well, whether, they want to get involved in short-term lets or just standard long-term lets to young professionals or families. So that they really do tick a lot of boxes. And we want to specifically focus on how Birmingham meets investors' criteria. And I think, good place to go with that would be, HS2 is in the pipeline. Yes, it's had delays and various issues, shall we say, but, it's going to connect Birmingham to London with faster train links, but actually that also means a greater connection to Europe. So this is going to have a big impact on Birmingham.
Yeah, exactly. If we look at how Crossrail affected London, for example. Now, that's not done yet. It should have been done, I believe, quite a while ago. But as tends to happen with these infrastructure projects, they take longer than expected. But, there are some areas on the outskirts of London that have, again, more than doubled in value, pretty much solely on speculation of Crossrail. There's not much else that's happened there, aside from the fact they're getting a Crossrail station. So there's obviously that. I think we've probably had HS2 priced in to Birmingham to this point, but where we will see an uplift in price is when it actually exists.
Mm.
And we're also seeing you have these massive infrastructure projects like Crossrail, billions of pounds being spent, but then you need to think about all the other smaller projects that are offshoots of that and are only taking place because that's taking place.
Mm.
So major companies investing in infrastructure in Birmingham because they know Crossrail is coming and because they can see, the masses amount of inward investment, both domestically and from overseas. So, massive projects like that, they have lots of other sort of ancillary benefits where others see the confidence that are going into that city, and that gives them confidence to invest in that city.
Indeed, and a good example of that is the regeneration of the Smithfield area, where there's a huge amount of money going in, 8,000 new jobs going to be created as a result, for this kind of new cultural quarter where they have their shops and their cafes and all that good stuff. And the fact that investor money is going into the area, that should give smaller investors and landlords confidence that these big institutional investors are coming and investing in the city post-COVID.
Absolutely. We spoke about confidence in a city. Now, when you look at FTSE 100 developers, they've predominantly been London-based as well. But Lendlease is one of the biggest developers in the world, and they have bought that Smithfield site. Yep. It's a £1.5 billion redevelopment, and I think a lot of people underestimate how much £1 billion is. And you hear this word billions getting thrown around, but that is a lot of money. That getting spent on a site right next to a city obviously is going to have a really positive impact. We manage 3 blocks all around that site, partly on standard ASTs, partly on short-term lets. And, even just the fact that big Smithfield Markets has been demolished and it makes for easier commutability into the city from that sort of southeast Birmingham corridor. Even that's already had a positive impact without any, actual benefits of that development yet being built. So, you can imagine over the next few years, as that starts to get built out in stages, how much of a positive impact that's going to have.
Now is the time to be getting in when you're hearing about these very, very big infrastructure projects. And, your past experience of Birmingham has shown that if you get in at the right point, you can enjoy some very, significant capital growth. You can benefit from strong tenant demand, and you just have to have that little bit of extra vision to see what an area is like when it's completed. It's a bit like going into a house that needs a refurb. You've got to see through the faults and the problems with the property and know that it could look absolutely spectacular when you've done your work on it. And it's the same for these cities. Some of these areas are quite deprived. They have some social issues, but they're being gentrified gradually and brought up to standard. You got to see the potential in these areas, I think.
Yeah, exactly right. And we have seen quite a strong ripple effect in Birmingham. People talk about the ripple effect and one area getting sort of nicer and then other areas around it getting nicer. And that has certainly happened around the Birmingham city centre. If we go kind of 6 years ago, we were very focused on the jewellery quarter in Birmingham, which is now the wealthy area of the city. It's the really nice area. I was there just a couple of weeks ago, and that's where the really trendy, restaurants and cafes and things are. And that's kind of spread its way around the city to now places like where you mentioned the Smithfield Markets, which is Digbeth. That's an area which, if you ask someone from Birmingham about that area, they tell you it's rough. And this is something I find really interesting, actually. Speaking to people from those cities, they tend to be the people that are most difficult to convince to invest in those regeneration areas because they grew up there and, they say, oh, no, that's Stab City. I wouldn't invest there. But You know, if you compare it, for example, to Shoreditch 20 years ago, that was rough. And now it's really nice. You know, would be one of the most expensive postcodes in London,
Mm.
simply because of its proximity to central London. So you've had that ripple effect, which is obviously the west end of London's always kind of been nice, and that's rippled its way around the city to pretty much anywhere within proximity of central London, and that's something that's definitely now taking place in these northern cities and especially Birmingham.
Yeah, I can concur what you said there, Paul, with my experience in London and my apartments that I bought back in 2004, because I was looking at these investment, communication and infrastructure boxes to be ticked. And all of my apartments and the areas where they are have really come up and done very, very well. And you've got to allow, I think, 5 to 10 years for that process to take place. But it will take place and you will benefit from it. And I
Yeah,
think, Paul, one thing I think is really important about Nova is that you're actually investing in these properties alongside your clients, because you actually genuinely believe in these areas and believe that they're going to really come good in the future. So I do like the fact that you're actually invested alongside your clients.
yeah, I think that gives a lot of our clients peace of mind as well, is that we actually put our money where our mouth is,
Mm.
and we are actually experienced investors ourselves, and we have tangible evidence for that. Unfortunately, there are too many cowboys out there that talk about all sorts of things that aren't achievable. We're very frank and honest in our approach, and we're happy to be very open with people about what we've done ourselves and how that's performed. But yes, Birmingham's a great example of that as well. Over the years, our clients have been investing there. We've also been investing there alongside them. And it's good to see that that's gone quite well.
Well, let's move on a little bit, because I think one thing that's notable about Birmingham is that it's got the highest population growth outside of London, and it's a very young city. It's attracting a lot of young professionals. Now, again, music to landlords' ears, because with any investment, you want to find the demand before you go around creating the supply. And I
Yeah.
think it's clear from the indicators that Birmingham is going to have continued high demand for rental properties.
Yep. Yeah. So strong population growth, also a very young population.
Mm.
So Birmingham actually has the youngest population of any major city in Europe. So that's quite positive as well, especially given the fact that young professional sort of generation are getting married later, they're having children later, they are more lifestyle focused, and therefore they're more likely to stay in that sort of location a lot longer than any generation before them. So, it's almost like seeing, a really good young football team that's going to mature into a much better football team. That's certainly what's happening in Birmingham at the moment.
Indeed. And, typically in the past, Birmingham's been known for certain sectors, heavy industry and things like that, logistics. But actually, one of the growing sectors is medical technology, medtech. And there's a workforce of around 23,000 people in that sector, and that is set to grow. And there's a fantastic initiative called the Midlands Engine, which is all about promoting Birmingham and the Midlands as a place to do business. And it does share a lot of really useful intel for landlords and investors. And I would recommend everybody to go and have a look at the Midlands Engine website and on their Twitter feed as well. They've got some good stuff. And obviously we've had the Freeport announced at East Midlands Airport as well. So that's another very, very positive thing. It's looking very, very good for Birmingham. The Department of Transport are moving their second headquarters there. I'm actually going to need extra time to say how many good things are going on. And we know that Goldman Sachs are moving a new office there as well. Again, Paul, it goes back to what we said earlier about big companies having faith in these cities, and Goldman Sachs, they want a footprint in Birmingham.
Yeah, so one of, if not the most productive industries in London is financial services, or
Mm.
at least professional services. So it's very interesting to see that a big chunk of that is moving to Birmingham and the other the other two cities we're talking about. Goldman Sachs is the most recent one, and probably the biggest, most respected name to announce thousands of jobs moving there. But before them, we also had Deutsche Bank and HSBC. So, they're three of the biggest names in financial services, all investing into Birmingham and moving jobs there. All three of them are big paying companies. Graduates starting there are starting on sort of triple or quadruple the average UK salary. Now, some people would say that's unfair, but that is definitely going to benefit that city as a whole.
Indeed. When we talk about cities, Paul, that they're huge entities with lots of different neighbourhoods, landlords need to go down to a granular level. I think they have to know that city literally at a street level, and that's where you come in with Nova, because you do all the you've got people on the ground, you've got property managers in the city that know the city, and you go down to that kind of granular level, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people look at the UK property market as one, and it's just not. There are so many different micro markets within the overall UK property market. And I think far too many people sort of fail to consider that. Some locations or even specific properties can perform really well, even in a bad market, and vice versa. Some areas will do badly, even in a good market. And it all comes down to what you say, the granular level. What drives that particular location, that particular property? What are the positive fundamentals that are currently in place there? And what is the positive growth and change that's taking place there to move it in the right direction? So that's what we look for. As you say, we have staff on the ground. I'm there personally myself quite often when I'm not in Australia like I am now. But yeah, we know those places like the back of our hands, because we've made it our business for that to be the case.
Yeah, I just wondered, Paul, as we kind of close this out, will you be changing your model very slightly, just because we know that tenant priorities have changed, and they are looking for outside space or roof terraces. They are looking for additional facilities like concierge, gym, that kind of thing. You and I visited one of your developments a few weeks ago, which I was very impressed by. Literally 10 minutes walk to the bull ring, which would be absolutely fatal for me with regards to shopping. And it had really nice communal areas, a garden. We could see all the people in the development, enjoying the outside space, and
Yeah.
that was really a very good example of what your clients have invested up till now. But will you be kind of tweaking your requirements slightly because of COVID?
Yeah, look, I'm glad you asked that, and we have been asked that question a few times. But the answer in short is no, because we've already considered those things pre-COVID. And I'm not Nostradamus in any respect whatsoever. I'm not saying I foresaw any of this, but the one thing we have always seen as being very important is to invest in properties that aren't just attractive to investors, but are also attractive to owner-occupiers. Because quite often, owner-occupiers are your exit. They are more than half the market. So you need a property that's going to appeal to an emotional buyer. If you can tick as many of those emotional boxes as possible, which just so happen to also be quite similar boxes to what a renter is looking for, because they are also emotional renters. We are emotional beings as people. If we can provide those things, that's what drives demand. So we've never invested in shoebox cookie cutter style properties in the past. We've always considered livability as being quite important. And it's great to see that. I suppose that's probably even more important now. So it just so happens, maybe luck or coincidence, that our clients and we will probably benefit from having that opinion, years ago.
Yeah, indeed. Well, really, really interesting to talk about Birmingham. So much going for it. And we do actually have a thread running on Property Tribes called Birmingham and Midlands COVID-19 Recovery. And that thread is powered by Nova Financial. And I update it regularly with all the good news coming through for Birmingham and the Midlands area. And I have to say, Paul, out of the 3 threads that we've got running documenting COVID recovery, it's actually had the most updates out of all of them. So I do think that the future is looking very bright for Birmingham.
I agree.
Fantastic. Well, that's it for today's instalment of our City Focus Week. Please do join Paul and myself tomorrow, where we will be travelling north, and we will be taking an in-depth look at the city of Manchester. So please join us tomorrow.